Get your black broke ass off my throne, boy. The words, dripping with venom and entitlement, sliced through the quiet hum of the cabin. Eleanor Vance's manicured fingers, each tipped with a blood-red nail, dug into Xavier Hayes's shoulder like talons. She yanked him upward, a sudden violent motion that sent his lukewarm coffee sloshing across the crisp pages of his newspaper. The hot liquid splashed against his jeans, a fleeting sting of heat that was nothing compared to the fiery humiliation of the moment. With a final, contemptuous shove, she sent him stumbling into the narrow aisle and dropped into seat 3A, the plush leather sighing as it accepted her weight. She claimed the space as if conquering a foreign land. "That's better," she breathed, smoothing the front of her pristine St. John knit suit and claiming the armrest that still held the warmth of his body. She glanced around, her eyes broadcasting a clear message to the other first-class passengers. Some people forget where they belong. Have you ever been judged, truly and completely, the second you walked into a room? Before you ever spoke a word? If you have, I need you to let me know your story in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if you believe in the kind of justice that shakes the very foundations of power, prove it. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel right now, and ring that notification bell, because you are not going to want to miss a single solitary second of what's about to happen. Xavier stood hunched beneath the low curve of the cabin ceiling, a silent monolith in the turbulent river of her prejudice. His plain gray hoodie, the soft, worn fabric a comfortable second skin, and his faded Levi's might as well have been a convict's uniform. They screamed economy class. They screamed that he was out of place. Eleanor's diamond bracelet, a constellation of captured light, flashed under the cabin's soft glow as she adjusted herself in his seat. It was a beacon of her status, a stark contrast to his unadorned wrists. Around them, the modern world's first responders to drama sprang into action. Phones were lifted, silent and predatory. A teenager across the aisle, a girl named Chloe Jensen, swiped her screen, her thumb hovering over the red Go Live button on her TikTok. She pressed it. The theft of a man's dignity was now being broadcast in real time. 200 passengers on Orion Air Flight 815 from Chicago to San Francisco were now witnesses. They watched the crime unfold, their faces a mixture of discomfort, apathy, and morbid curiosity. Xavier's hand tightened around his boarding pass, the paper crinkling in his grip. The ink, stark against the white cardstock, was slightly smudged from the coffee, but the characters were unmistakable. Hayes, X. Seat 3A. Have you ever watched evil, in its petty, everyday form, score a victory while the whole world just stood there and watched? Justice was a slow-moving storm, far off on the horizon, but it was coming. A crackle over the intercom confirmed it. Flight doors will be closing in 10 minutes. All passengers must be in their seats for departure. A flight attendant, Jessica Riley, her blonde ponytail bouncing with a youthful energy that hadn't yet been crushed by the job, rushed toward the commotion. She saw the scene and her mind, conditioned by 1,000 unconscious biases, processed it in a nanosecond. A beautifully dressed, distressed woman of a certain age, and a casually dressed black man looming over her. The math was simple. "Ma'am, I am so sorry about this." Jessica's voice was a waterfall of practiced sympathy as she placed a gentle, reassuring hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "Are you all right?" Xavier stepped forward, his boarding pass extended like a peace offering. "Excuse me, this is my assigned seat, 3A. Jessica's eyes flickered towards the paper, but didn't truly see it. It was a prop in a scene she had already written in her head. Her gaze swept over his hoodie, his scuffed Adidas sneakers, the rich, dark tone of his skin. The verdict was in. "Sir, I think there's been a simple misunderstanding," she said, her smile tight and condescending. Economy class is just a little further toward the back of the aircraft. Eleanor sighed, a dramatic, theatrical sound of relief. Oh, thank heavens. Someone with some common sense. Xavier's voice remained a placid lake in the hurricane of their assumptions. He didn't raise it. He didn't let a tremor of anger ripple through it. I'd appreciate it if you would just look at my boarding pass. Sir, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be, Jessica said, physically positioning herself between Xavier and the seat, a human shield for prejudice. I'm sure we can find you a very comfortable seat in your actual cabin. Behind them, the whispers grew louder. More phones emerged, a constellation of recording devices. Chloe Jensen's TikTok live stream counter ticked upward. 500 viewers, 800, 200. The comments began to flood her screen. This is straight-up racism. Why won't she just look at the damn ticket? Get the supervisor. I don't understand the confusion, Xavier said again, his quiet insistence a counterpoint to their loud ignorance. My ticket clearly shows— Look at him, Eleanor interrupted, her voice sharp and dismissive, waving a hand in his direction as if shooing away a fly. Does he look like he belongs in first class? I am an executive platinum member. I have flown over 2 million miles with this airline. Jessica nodded, her expression one of deep, knowing solidarity. Of course, ma'am. We appreciate your loyalty more than you know. I have the same loyalty program status, Xavier offered, his voice still impossibly calm. If you could just verify my information. Sir, I don't have time for these games. Jessica's tone hardened, the plastic sympathy cracking to reveal the steel of authority beneath. Now I need you to find your correct seat so we can depart on time. This is your final warning. Chloe's live stream viewer count skyrocketed. 5,000 viewers, 8,000, 12,000. The internet was now a passenger on this flight. Xavier pulled out his own phone. The screen lit up, showing a cascade of missed calls and urgent text messages. One preview was visible on the lock screen. Board meeting pushed to 4 p.m. Confirmed. Where are you? Eleanor caught a glimpse of the message and let out a derisive snort. Putting on quite a show, aren't you? Trying to look important. Jessica saw the expensive-looking phone, the latest model, but her mind had already sorted it into the fraud category. It was a prop, just like the story about the boarding pass. Sir, if you do not move to your assigned seat, I will be forced to call security. I am in my assigned seat, Xavier repeated, the words calm, but weighted with a finality she couldn't comprehend. No, you're not. Jessica's voice rose, a high, sharp sound that cut through the cabin. This is first class. You're clearly in economy. The assumption hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Xavier glanced up at the overhead bin where his leather briefcase was stowed. His initials, XOI, were embossed in subtle gold leaf. The briefcase alone had cost more than her monthly rent, but her eyes, blinded by prejudice, never traveled that high. Excuse me, miss, a voice called out from a few rows back. It was a businessman, his face etched with disapproval. Maybe you should just look at his ticket. It would take 5 seconds. Thank you, sir, but I can handle this, Jessica snapped, her authority challenged. Eleanor, meanwhile, was preening, holding court. She examined her perfect nails. I can't believe this is even a discussion. Just look at us. Then look at him. It's perfectly obvious who belongs where. Xavier's jaw tightened, an almost imperceptible clenching of muscle. His breathing remained steady, a slow, controlled rhythm. Years of meditation, of sitting in boardrooms where he was the only person who looked like him, had forged an iron composure. 8 minutes to departure. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, a disembodied plea for order. Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for this delay, Jessica said, turning her full attention back to Eleanor. We'll have this situation resolved immediately. She pressed the call button for the purser. "Markham, I need assistance in first class. We have a passenger in the wrong cabin who is refusing to comply." "Oh, Beth!" Xavier watched the entire interaction with a strange sense of detachment, like a scientist observing a chemical reaction. Every word, every sneer, every dismissive gesture was being documented by a dozen tiny lenses. The evidence was being compiled perfectly. Chloe's stream had now reached 25,000 viewers. Her whispered commentary was a Greek chorus to the unfolding tragedy. "The flight attendant won't even look at his boarding pass," she breathed into her phone. "This is actually insane." "I've seen this before," Eleanor announced loudly to the passengers around her, playing the part of the worldly victim. "They get one good credit card, buy one flashy item, and think they can fool the rest of us. Designer hoodie?" she scoffed, gesturing at Xavier's chest. "Please, that's from an outlet mall." Xavier said nothing. His silence seemed to infuriate her more than any argument ever could. It was a mirror, and she did not like the reflection. "At least say something," she taunted, her voice rising. "Defend yourself, unless of course you know you're in the wrong." The sound of heavy, authoritative footsteps approached from the galley. Markham Thorne, the flight's purser, a 22-year veteran with silver temples and a permanent air of weary superiority, arrived on the scene. His eyes took in the situation in a single, practiced glance. Well-dressed, older white woman, seated. Casually dressed black man, standing. In his mind, the equation was already solved. "What seems to be the problem here?" Markham's voice was deep, carrying the full weight of airline policy and procedure. "This passenger," Jessica said, infusing the word with the venom of an accusation, "refuses to move to his assigned seat in economy. He is disrupting our entire departure schedule." Markham didn't ask to see Xavier's ticket. He didn't ask for his name or his confirmation number. His assumption was as instant as it was absolute. "Sir, you need to find your correct seat immediately. We have a schedule to maintain." For the third time, Xavier extended his boarding pass. "I am in my correct seat. This is my documentation." Markham barely glanced at the paper in his hand. "Sir, I don't have time for fake documents or for children's games. Move to the economy cabin now, or I will call airport security and have you removed." The threat landed like a physical blow. Several passengers gasped. Chloe's viewer count leaped to 50,000. Xavier looked around the cabin, from one face to another. Every eye told the same story. They saw his skin, his clothes, and they had passed their judgment. The boarding pass in his hand might as well have been written in invisible ink. 6 minutes to departure, the intercom announced. "Perfect," Eleanor said, settling deeper into the stolen seat. "I have a tight connection in San Francisco. I simply cannot afford any delays because of this nonsense." Xavier nodded slowly, a small, deliberate movement, as if a final decision had been made. He pulled out his phone again and opened an app. The loading screen showed a familiar logo, the stylized star of Orion Air. "What's he doing now?" Jessica muttered to Markham. "Probably looking up the number for customer service to complain," Markham replied, with a dismissive smirk. "They always do." Xavier's thumb moved across the screen, his movements fluid and efficient, navigating through menus and sub-menus that no ordinary passenger had ever seen. His expression remained placid, almost serene. The storm was about to break. "We have a code yellow situation in first class," Markham spoke into his radio, his voice low and urgent, requesting the final level of crew support. Within seconds, 2 more flight attendants appeared, completing the cordon. Brenda Davies, a 40-something veteran with tired eyes that had seen it all and held no patience for any of it, and Kyle Bishop, a fresh-faced 25-year-old, eager to prove his competence. "What's the situation?" Brenda asked, crossing her arms as her eyes performed a head-to-toe inventory of Xavier, dismissing him completely. "Passenger refuses to move to economy," Jessica explained, her voice gaining confidence from the reinforcements. "He won't accept that he's in the wrong seat." Kyle positioned himself behind Xavier, subtly blocking any potential retreat down the aisle. "Sir, we're really going to need you to cooperate with us here." 4 uniformed crew members now formed a tight semicircle around him in the narrow aisle, a tribunal of ignorance. Eleanor watched from her stolen throne, a smug, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "This is just embarrassing," she announced to the cabin at large. "I am trying to get to an incredibly important business meeting, and this man is holding up the entire flight with his delusions." Xavier remained calm. His phone was still in his hand, the Orion Air app open, but the screen was angled away from the crew. 5 minutes to departure. Crew, please prepare for pushback." The captain's voice was a blade cutting through the thick tension. "You hear that?" Markham's voice hardened into granite. "You are now delaying 200 passengers because you can't accept reality." "Yeah," Kyle added, emboldened by the group dynamic. "Just take your real seat, dude, and we can all move on with our day." Brenda stepped closer, her voice dropping to a low, threatening whisper that was meant for him alone. "Listen to me very carefully. You will move to economy right now, or airport security will remove you from this aircraft in handcuffs. Your choice." The word handcuffs sent a shockwave through the cabin. More phones appeared. Chloe's TikTok stream had exploded, crossing the 150,000 viewer mark. The comment section was a waterfall of rage and disbelief. "Call the police on them. This is 2025 FFS. Sue them all. Tichbom, Orion Air racism." Eleanor basked in the attention, her sense of vindication palpable. "I have never, in all my years of travel, seen such entitled behavior. Some people truly believe the rules don't apply to them." She turned, addressing the filming passengers directly. "You are all witnesses to this man's disruption. I tried to handle this quietly, but he simply refuses to listen to reason." The businessman in seat 4C lowered his laptop. "Excuse me, but shouldn't you at least look at his boarding pass before you threaten him with arrest?" "Sir, please do not interfere with the crew," Markham cut him off sharply. "We are handling this situation professionally." "Professionally?" The businessman's eyebrows shot up. "You haven't performed the most basic act of verification." Brenda whirled on him. "Are you questioning our professional procedures?" "I'm questioning why 4 of you are terrified to look at a single piece of paper," the man replied evenly. Jessica's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. "We don't need to examine obvious forgeries." "How do you know it's forged if you haven't looked at it?" an elderly woman in 2B asked, her voice frail but firm. The crew was losing control of the narrative. The jury of passengers was turning against them. The phones kept recording. "Just use your eyes!" Eleanor stood up from the seat, gesturing wildly at Xavier. "Does anything about this man scream first-class passenger to you?" He pointed at his hoodie. "That is a $30 sweatshirt. I know quality when I see it. His shoes are probably from Payless. His jeans look like they came from Walmart." The cruelty was so casual, so confident. Jessica, the young flight attendant, nodded eagerly. "Ma'am is absolutely right. First-class passengers have certain presentation standards." Brenda crossed her arms, her face a mask of stern authority. "We are trained to identify passengers who might be out of place. It's about maintaining the premium experience for our legitimate customers." Xavier's phone buzzed again. A text message preview was visible for a fraction of a second. Eleanor, whose eyes were locked on him, saw it and laughed. "Oh, look, he's got someone texting him about a board meeting. How adorable. It's probably his shift supervisor at Burger King. The apathetic passengers shifted uncomfortably at the raw cruelty, but the crew seemed energized by her confidence. Markham's patience had completely evaporated. "Sir, this is your final warning. Security is already on their way up the jet bridge." "Actually," Xavier said, his voice still quiet, but now with a new resonance that seemed to vibrate in the air, "I'd like them to see this." His calm response seemed to unnerve them. They had expected shouting, anger, threats of a lawsuit. Instead, he stood there with the unnerving placidity of a man who was methodically collecting evidence. "See what?" Jessica snapped. "You making a fool of yourself?" Heavy footsteps echoed from the jet bridge. 2 airport security officers appeared at the aircraft door, their radios crackling. "There he is!" Jessica pointed at Xavier, her finger a trembling accusation. "That's the passenger causing the disruption." Officer Miller, a tall black man in his late 40s with a face that had seen it all, approached with his partner, Officer Chen, a young Asian woman whose calm eyes missed nothing. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Miller asked, his voice a calm, professional baritone. Markham launched into his prepared, self-assured narrative. "This passenger refuses to move to his assigned seat in economy. He is claiming this first-class seat belongs to him, despite all obvious evidence to the contrary." "So, what obvious evidence?" Officer Chen asked, her question sharp and precise. The crew exchanged glances. They had been so certain, so confident in their collective assumption, they hadn't actually prepared to present any factual proof. "Well," Jessica stammered, "I mean, just look at him." Officer Miller's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Ma'am, I need specific evidence of wrongdoing, not your observations on his appearance." Eleanor, sensing the crew's hesitation, jumped into the breach. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. I have been unbelievably patient, but this man has been harassing me for 10 minutes. I just want to sit in the seat that I paid for and be left in peace." "We understand, ma'am," Officer Miller replied, his tone neutral. He then turned to Xavier. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Xavier handed over the crumpled, coffee-stained paper. Officer Chen took it and examined it carefully, her brow furrowing slightly as she read. The aircraft had gone utterly silent, the only sounds the hum of the auxiliary power and the whispered commentary from Chloe's phone. Officer Chen looked at the boarding pass, then at Xavier, then at Eleanor sitting smugly in seat 3A. Her professional neutrality gave way to visible confusion. "This boarding pass is for seat 3A, she stated slowly, looking at her partner. Markham stepped forward, his voice desperate. "It's obviously forged. Look at him. Does he look like he can afford a first-class ticket?" "That's not for us to determine," Officer Chen began, but Eleanor cut her off, her voice shrill with indignation. "Please, officer, use your common sense here. I am an Executive Platinum member. My boarding pass is on my phone. Here." She fumbled with her phone, pulling up her own digital pass. "See? Eleanor Vance, seat 3A, first class." Officer Miller looked at Eleanor's phone screen, then back at the paper boarding pass in his partner's hand. The situation was suddenly more complicated than a simple seating dispute. It was a direct contradiction. "Sir," Officer Miller addressed Xavier, his tone still professional but now tinged with caution. "Can you please show us some identification and explain how you came to be in possession of this boarding pass?" The entire cabin watched, holding its collective breath. Xavier reached slowly into the pocket of his hoodie, his movements deliberate, unhurried. He withdrew his phone. "Actually," Xavier said, and his voice carried a new quality, a quiet authority that made every person on that plane lean in closer. "I think there's something you all need to see first." The app on his phone had finished loading. The storm had arrived. Xavier's thumb moved across the screen with practiced, lethal precision. The familiar Orion Air passenger interface dissolved, replaced by a screen that none of them had ever seen before. It was a corporate backend, an executive dashboard, a CEO-level portal. The screen filled with operational data, fleet statuses, authorization codes, and a header that made Officer Chen's breath catch in her throat. At the top of the screen, next to the Orion Air logo, was a photo ID and a title that hung in the air like a death sentence. Xavier M. Hayes, Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Board Authority Level, Omega Employee. ID, Lodo 01, Direct Reports, $87,000. Officer Miller leaned over his partner's shoulder to see the screen, and his professional composure, forged over 2 decades of service, cracked. His eyes widened. "Sir," he whispered, the word barely audible. The shift in the officer's demeanor was instantaneous and absolute. They took a half step back, their entire posture changing from one of enforcement to one of profound deference. Markham Thorne, the purser, noticed it first. "What? What is it? What are you looking at?" Xavier turned the phone screen toward him. Markham's eyes darted across the display, his brain struggling to process the words. His face cycled through a rapid series of emotions, from confident authority to utter confusion to dawning, gut-wrenching horror. The transformation took less than 3 seconds. That can't be real. Markham's clipboard, the symbol of his authority, slipped from his numb fingers and clattered to the floor. Jessica leaned in, trying to see what had shocked her supervisor into a stupor. When the information finally registered, every drop of blood seemed to drain from her face. She put a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, oh my God." Brenda and Kyle crowded closer, their faces a mask of disbelief as they squinted at the screen. The corporate hierarchy was laid bare, and it was brutally, terrifyingly clear. Every single person working for this airline, from the captain in the cockpit to the baggage handlers on the tarmac, ultimately reported to the man they had been systematically humiliating for the past 15 minutes. "Mr. Hayes," Officer Miller said, his voice now laced with a deep, horrified respect. We were not aware of your position, sir." Xavier looked at the security officer, his eyes calm and assessing. "Of course you weren't, officer. That was entirely the point of the exercise." The cabin had gone dead silent. The only sound was the electronic hum and the soft rustle of clothing as people shifted in their seats, craning their necks. Every passenger could feel the cataclysmic shift in power, even if they couldn't see the screen. Eleanor Vance, still occupying seat 3A, looked around at the sea of stunned faces, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What is everyone staring at? Can we please resolve this ridiculous situation so we can take off?" Xavier turned the phone, aiming the screen directly at her. Eleanor's eyes scanned the display. Her expression cycled through the same stages as the crew's, but with an added layer of pure, unadulterated terror. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling to dust before her very eyes. You can't be," she stammered, her voice a fragile whisper. "I own 72% of the voting stock in this airline, Ms. Vance." Xavier's voice was still quiet, but it now carried the unmistakable weight of command. It was the voice of a man who didn't need to shout to be obeyed. "I don't just own seat 3A. I own every seat on this aircraft, the aircraft itself, and the gate it's parked at. You are currently trespassing in the CEO's personal seat." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She gripped the armrests of his seat, her knuckles turning white. She looked down at the plush leather as if it had suddenly become electric. The power dynamic on Flight 815 had just been inverted with the force of a supernova. And if you think this is the kind of justice we need to see more of in the world, then smash that subscribe button and ring the bell right now. We're just getting to the consequences, and you are going to want a front row seat. What do you think should happen to this crew and this woman? Let me know in the comments below. Markham Thorne found his voice, though it was trembling and weak. Sir, Mr. Hayes, we had no idea. We were just following standard. Standard what, Mr. Thorne? Xavier interrupted, his voice gentle but razor-sharp. Standard procedure is to examine a passenger's documentation before making an accusation. Standard procedure is to treat every single customer with dignity and respect, regardless of what they're wearing. He looked at each of the 4 crew members in turn, his gaze lingering for a moment on each of them. Instead, you made a judgment based on my appearance. You refused, repeatedly, to even look at my boarding pass. And you, he looked at Brenda, threatened me with arrest for the crime of trying to sit in my own seat. Jessica's hands were shaking uncontrollably. Mr. Hayes, I am so sorry. We made a terrible, terrible mistake. You made several terrible mistakes, Xavier corrected her calmly. But the biggest one was assuming that respect is something that is earned by the price of a person's suit, rather than by the simple fact of their humanity. Chloe's live stream had exploded. The viewer count was now climbing past 250,000. The comment section was a blur of pure, cathartic rage and demands for justice. Xavier checked his watch, not for the departure time, but for something else entirely. His calendar was open on his phone, and a passenger in the row behind him gasped when he caught a glimpse of the screen. 3:45 p.m. Unannounced passenger experience assessment, flight 8:15. 4:30 p.m. Emergency board meeting, discrimination protocol review. 5:00 p.m. Legal debt briefing, federal compliance violations. 5:30 p.m. Media relations press conference prep. Officer Chen saw it and her eyes widened. Sir, this was planned. This was a test. Xavier nodded slowly. I have been conducting unannounced field assessments of our passenger experience protocols for the last 6 months. Today's test, I must admit, has revealed systemic failures at every single level of crew interaction. The 4 crew members stood frozen, the blood draining from their faces. They understood now. They hadn't just made a mistake. They had walked directly into a meticulously orchestrated corporate sting operation and had failed in the most spectacular and public way imaginable. Eleanor tried to stand, to vacate the seat, but her legs felt like they were made of jelly. I didn't know, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I had no idea. Would it have mattered if you did? Xavier asked, his quiet question cutting her to the core. If I were just a regular passenger, an architect or a teacher who had saved up for a first-class ticket, would that have justified your behavior? The question hung in the air, a damning indictment of her entire worldview. She had no answer, because they both knew the truth. Markham Thorne, desperate to salvage the wreckage of his career, tried again. Sir, if we could perhaps speak privately, I am sure we can resolve this misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Thorne, Xavier replied, his voice devoid of heat but full of finality. You and your crew discriminated against a passenger based on his race and his perceived social class. The fact that your discrimination happened to be directed at your own chief executive officer is merely an ironic footnote. He gestured to the sea of phones still recording. More importantly, your actions were captured by dozens of witnesses and broadcast live to an audience of, what is it now? He glanced at Chloe's phone. Over 300,000 viewers. Brenda finally found her voice. Mr. Hayes, please, we can fix this. We can make this right. Xavier looked at her, and for the first time, a flicker of something that looked like pity entered his eyes. Ms. Davies, you threatened to have me removed from my own airplane in handcuffs. How exactly do you propose to make that right? The crew had no answer. They had crossed lines that could not be uncrossed. They had revealed their deepest biases, and they had done it all on camera for the world to see. Officer Miller cleared his throat. "Sir, what would you like us to do?" Xavier considered the question. Around him, 200 passengers waited, rapt, to see how a man with absolute power would choose to wield it now that the tables had been so dramatically turned. "Officer Miller, I would like you and Officer Chen to remain right here. I want you to witness what happens next. The documentation will be crucial for the federal investigation." Federal investigation. The words sent a visible chill through the cabin. Xavier opened his phone again, this time navigating to his contacts list. The screen showed a list of names that caused the crew's last flickering embers of hope to die completely. Cynthia Reed, General Counsel, Direct Line; Janet Mills, Chief HR Officer, Emergency Protocol; Michael Chen, VP, Media Relations, Crisis Management; Board Chair, Immediate Response. "Ladies and gentlemen," Xavier announced, his voice now projecting to the entire cabin, carrying the full authority of his ownership. "First, I want to apologize for this delay. What you have witnessed here today is a perfect and ugly example of why systemic change is so desperately necessary in corporate America." He looked at Eleanor, who was still frozen in his seat. "Ms. Vance, you have approximately 30 seconds to return to your actual assigned seat, 28B, a middle seat in economy, before I make the first of several phone calls that will permanently alter the course of your professional life." Eleanor's expensive, carefully constructed composure finally shattered completely. Sobs racked her body. "Please," she wept. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean—" "You meant every single word," Xavier said, his voice flat and quiet. "The only question now is, what happens next?" He pressed the first number on his phone. The call connected instantly, and he put it on speaker for the entire cabin, for the officers, for the live stream to hear. "Cynthia Reed, General Counsel's office." "Cynthia, it's Xavier. I'm on flight 815. I need you to prepare immediate documentation to file with the FAA and the Department of Transportation. We have a major incident." The lawyer's voice on the other end sharpened instantly. "Sir, what is the situation?" "I have just been the target of racial and class-based discrimination by 4 of our own crew members and a fellow passenger. The entire incident was captured on multiple devices and is currently being live-streamed to, at last count, over 400,000 viewers." Cynthia's silence was pregnant with the weight of billion-dollar lawsuits. "Sir," she said after a moment, "I will have a full legal team assembled within the hour. Are you physically harmed?" "Not physically," Xavier said, his eyes locked on Markham Thorne. "But our company's reputation and our federal compliance status are in critical condition. Employee number 7432, Markham Thorne. He just threatened to have me arrested for sitting in my own assigned seat. I will need his complete employment file, including all prior passenger complaints, and his termination papers drawn up immediately for gross misconduct." Markham's face went ashen. He knew his employee number by heart. "Mr. Hayes," Markham whispered, his voice pleading, "please, I have a family, I have a mortgage, I thought I was following protocol." "Protocol?" Xavier's voice remained calm, but it was now laced with ice. "Show me the page in our Orion Air employee manual that says a crew member should refuse to examine a passenger's boarding pass because of the color of his skin." Markham had no answer, because no such protocol existed. "Cynthia," Xavier continued into the phone, "I also need a comprehensive review of our current anti-discrimination policies. Clearly, they are a catastrophic failure if our frontline crew cannot distinguish between a legitimate security concern and blatant racial profiling. I want you to contact the Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights yourself. Inform them that we have had a major compliance failure and that we will be cooperating with their investigation fully." The legal implications were piling up, second by second. Also, Xavier added, prepare civil rights violation documentation under Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Note both individual and institutional liability. He ended the call, and without pausing, dialed the second number. Human Resources. HR Emergency Line. This is Director Janet Mills. Janet, it's Xavier. I am on Flight 815, and I need you to process 4 immediate employment actions. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning. Jessica Riley, employee number 9821. Full investigation into discrimination policy violations, 6-month unpaid suspension, pending the mandatory completion of a 100-hour implicit bias training program. She must pass a full psychological evaluation before she is even considered for reinstatement. Jessica's knees buckled. 6 months without a paycheck would mean losing her apartment, her car, everything. Kyle Bishop, employee number 11452. 1-year probation with mandatory weekly counseling sessions on professional conduct. He will be required to recertify in our diversity and inclusion training monthly. Any future incident of any kind results in immediate termination. Kyle nodded frantically, tears welling in his eyes, grateful just to still have a job. Brenda Davies, employee number 4588. Mandatory 200-hour advanced bias training program, professional counseling, and immediate demotion from senior flight attendant to junior status. A salary reduction of 20% for the next 3 years. Brenda's face crumpled. 20 years of seniority, of career advancement, had just been wiped out by 15 minutes of prejudice. And Markham Thorne, employee number 7432. Xavier's voice was now the sound of a judge delivering a final verdict. Immediate termination for cause, 0 severance, forfeiture of all untaken vacation pay, all stock options, and all company contributions to his pension. A permanent notation will be placed in his file preventing rehire by this company or any of our partner airlines in the aviation industry, globally. Markham collapsed, a boneless heap of despair, sobbing openly in the aisle of the aircraft. Please, Mr. Hayes, please don't do this. Don't ruin my life. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I can learn, I can change. Xavier looked down at the broken man on the floor, his expression unreadable. Mr. Thorne, you had 22 years to learn. 22 years of annual diversity workshops and customer service seminars. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And you chose to threaten your own CEO with arrest because you didn't like the color of his skin or the clothes he was wearing. He turned back to the phone. Janet, I want you to implement the following policy changes, effective immediately, across the entire fleet. All customer-facing crew members will be required to wear body cameras, effective tomorrow morning. Any passenger complaint involving a potential claim of discrimination must be immediately escalated, recorded, and reviewed by a newly formed bias response team within 24 hours. The budget allocation for the new program, sir? Janet asked. $100 million annually for the first 3 years, Xavier said, without a moment's hesitation. The number sent a ripple of shock through the passengers who heard it. This systemic failure ends today. He ended the HR call and turned his full, undivided attention to Eleanor Vance, who was now sitting in the economy seat she had been assigned, looking small and broken. He pulled up her LinkedIn profile on his phone, turning the screen so Chloe's 500,000 live stream viewers could see it clearly. Eleanor Vance, Senior Vice President of Global Marketing, Sterling Cosmetics, Chairwoman, Corporate Diversity and Inclusion Committee. He scrolled down to a recent post she had written. He read it aloud. And I quote, "At Sterling, we have 0 tolerance for discrimination in the workplace or in society. We must all hold ourselves to a higher standard and do better." The hypocrisy was so staggering, so profound, it was almost poetic. "Ms. Vance," Xavier said, his voice dangerously soft, "you publicly champion diversity while privately telling a black man to get his broke ass to the back of the plane. I imagine your employer and the global media will find this dichotomy interesting." "Please," she whispered, her carefully constructed world gone. I'm not usually like this. I don't know why I—" "You have two options, Miss Vance," Xavier said, cutting her off. The entire cabin leaned forward. "Option 1. You will record a full, unscripted public apology right now, which will be shared across all social media platforms. You will then complete 500 hours of community service, working specifically with civil rights organizations that combat homelessness and poverty. You will undergo 1 year of mandatory professional bias counseling at your own expense, and you will use your story, your failure, as a case study in diversity training sessions for corporate executives. Your humiliation will become a tool for education." It was comprehensive. It was humiliating, but it was not career-ending. "Option 2, Xavier continued. "I file federal discrimination charges against you personally. You will face up to $500,000 in civil penalties under California's hate crime enhancement laws. You will receive a lifetime ban not just from Orion Air, but from every major airline in the world. And I will personally call the CEO of Sterling Cosmetics and provide him with the full, unedited video of today's incident. The choice is yours." He dialed his third number. Media Relations. "Crisis Communications. This is Michael Chen." "Michael, it's Xavier. We have a code red incident. I need an immediate press response. I was just racially discriminated against by our own crew and a passenger on Flight 815. The incident has gone viral on social media." "Sir, how viral are we talking?" Chloe held up her phone. The viewer counter was ticking past 600,000. "Currently, over 600,000 people are watching it live across multiple platforms," Xavier said. "The hashtag Orion Air Racism is trending #1 worldwide on Twitter. I want a full press conference set up for 6 p.m. this evening. We are going with a full transparency protocol. Sir, the stock price, the board might want to consider damage control messaging first." "Michael," Xavier's voice was absolute. "We are not controlling damage. We are owning our failure. We are demonstrating publicly how we are fixing it. Transparency builds trust. Cover-ups and excuses destroy companies. Arrange the press conference." He hung up the phone. He looked directly into Chloe's phone camera, addressing the hundreds of thousands of people watching. "To everyone watching this stream, what you have witnessed today is ugly, and it is wrong. But it is not unique. This was not just about one seat on one airplane. This was about the quiet assumptions, the invisible biases, and the casual cruelty that marginalized people face every single day of their lives." He gestured to the disgraced crew and to Eleanor. "These individuals made judgments based on my skin color and my clothing. They refused to look at evidence. They threatened me with arrest. And they did it with confidence because deep down, they believed there would be no consequences for their actions. They were wrong." He turned back to Eleanor. "Ms. Vance, the 600,000 people watching this live stream and the millions who will watch it later are waiting for your decision. Do you choose accountability and a path toward redemption? Or do you choose legal consequences and career destruction?" Eleanor looked around at the faces staring at her. A sea of judgment. She had earned every bit of it. I choose option 1, she whispered. "The livestream audience cannot hear you, Ms. Vance," Xavier said firmly. "Speak clearly so that your choice is properly and permanently documented." Tears streamed down her face, carving paths through her expensive makeup. "I choose option 1, she said, her voice loud and clear and broken. "I choose to apologize. I will do the community service. I will do the counseling." Xavier nodded to Officer Miller. "Officer, please document that Ms. Vance has selected the path of accountability. Her public apology will be recorded before we deplane." He then turned to the devastated crew members. "As for the four of you, your employment fates have been determined based on your individual actions and failures of leadership in this disgusting incident." The aircraft finally began its pushback from the gate. As it did, a police car with flashing lights pulled up on the tarmac below. The passengers could see Markham Thorne, his career and life in ruins, being escorted in handcuffs by airport police. Justice on Orion Air Flight 815 had finally been served, systematically, thoroughly, and for the whole world to see. 6 months later, the transformation was not just complete, it was the new foundation of the company. Xavier stood in the auditorium at Orion Air's Chicago headquarters, reviewing the quarterly discrimination incident report. The numbers on the screen told a story more powerful than any press release. Bias-related passenger complaints were down 92% across the entire network. Customer satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. The Orion Air Dignity Protocol had become the new gold standard for the entire aviation industry. At a podium in the company's state-of-the-art training center, Jessica Riley stood before 200 new flight attendant recruits. Her 6-month unpaid suspension had been a period of intense, painful self-reflection and education. She had returned to the company not just as a flight attendant, but as the airline's most passionate and effective discrimination prevention trainer. "I looked at Mr. Hayes," she told the silent, attentive recruits, her voice steady and clear, "and I saw only my own assumptions. I saw his clothes, I saw his skin color. I refused to see his humanity, his documentation, or the truth. Do not ever make my mistake. Every single person who steps onto your aircraft deserves your unconditional respect." Her story of catastrophic failure and hard-won redemption had already been used to train over 5,000 airline employees across the country. Karen Vance had completed her 500 hours of community service at a shelter for homeless youth in San Francisco. The experience had fundamentally rewired her understanding of the world. She had voluntarily left her high-paying job at Sterling Cosmetics to become a full-time, non-profit diversity consultant, using her own story as a brutal, honest tool to help other C-suite executives confront their own unconscious biases. All of her speaking fees were donated directly to civil rights organizations. And Chloe Jensen, the teenager whose live stream had sparked a revolution, had received a full-ride journalism scholarship to Northwestern, funded personally by Xavier Hayes. Her short documentary, Flight 815, The Day the Tables Turned, had won a Student Academy Award and was now required viewing in corporate ethics classes at universities nationwide. The change wasn't just at Orion Air. The Hayes Protocol, as it became known, was adopted by every major transportation company in America. Congress, under immense public pressure fueled by the viral video, passed the Equal Access in Transportation Act, mandating federal oversight and annual bias audits for all commercial carriers. 1 year to the day after the incident, Xavier Hayes once again took his seat, 3A, on Flight 815 from Chicago to San Francisco. The crew was entirely new, save for one familiar face. Jessica Riley, having earned her reinstatement, greeted him with a respectful nod and a genuine smile. She and her crew treated every single passenger, from the first row to the last, with the exact same level of courtesy and professionalism. The transformation was real. The vigilance was permanent. Your voice is the most powerful tool you have in this fight. Have you witnessed discrimination in your travels, at your job, or in your daily life? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could be the one that prevents someone else from feeling that same pain. It could be the spark that ignites change in your community. Tag someone who needs to see this message of hope and accountability. Hit that share button, because these stories are more than just entertainment. They are the blueprints for a better world. When we speak up together, systemic change doesn't just happen, it becomes inevitable. Subscribe to this channel for more untold stories of quiet courage turning into lasting transformation. Hit that notification bell, because these conversations are changing the world, one story at a time. The question you have to ask yourself isn't whether you will face injustice. It's how you will respond when you do. Will you stay silent, or will you become the catalyst? Will you accept prejudice as just the way things are, or will you demand better? One man's refusal to accept humiliation changed an entire industry. One choice to educate rather than retaliate transformed millions of travel experiences. You have that same power. In your workplace, in your community, in your family. You can choose dignity over discrimination. You can choose accountability over apathy. You can choose progress over prejudice. Don't just watch this story. Become part of the movement. Because when we all stand together for justice, discrimination doesn't stand a chance.